hinting at a conspiratorial kind of a number of forces underneath this vitriol on both sides. You're hinting at that. I'm saying out loud, it's Facebook, it's the social media platforms, it's the phone that allow people to basically select their own worldview based on information coming from sources that only reflect the way they want to see the world.
Yeah, that is definitely, that's definitely within.
That's, I don't know that you can call that a conspiracy or just
that
obvious.
Part is not a conspiracy.
I mean, it's just obvious technology. It allows people to see the world based on the way they want to see it and basically ignore other realities. And the other thing that's unique about what you said earlier, the country is made up of this country is now currently made up of about 300 million citizens and about another 20 million that Biden let in. So you got about almost 400 million people here. The difference between now and when it was incepted in 1776, 1787, when the Constitution was formalized and ratified, right around that time. You with me so far?
Yeah.
The population was largely homogeneous.
Europe, ethnically,
Caucasian, white. You had slaves, and you had some indigenous people, which were.
But they weren't really participating. But they weren't not
participating
in significant number, and they weren't participating.
Yeah, they were like, get the hell out of here. Leave us.
Yeah.
Nobody ever talks about that. We're so diverse today. So contrast today, 250 years into the future from that point, you've got Asian, you've got Korean, you've got Vietnamese, you've got Chinese, you've got Japanese, you've got Hispanics, you've got Puerto Ricans, you've got Cubans, you got blacks from Kenya, you got blacks from Morocco, you got blacks from Egypt, you got blacks from
Nigeria, Congo,
Australians, you've got French. So the point is, the salad bowl is such a mixture of so many ethnicities, of so many anthropologies, of so many different perspectives, that you have literally millions almost, I guess you could say thousands, probably not millions, probably 10,000 ways of looking at what this country should look like, and not able to agree on this dumb concept of shared American values, which I just don't think exists. Because a population, as I said, 250 years ago, was much more anthropologically easier to manage, easier to arrive at consensus than it is today, because you literally have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of different ethnicities that I don't know how it's possible to agree on almost anything.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would agree with you on that assessment, and here's why.
Good day, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria. This is Jimmy Tran. This is another installment of Inside Reality. We're with you typically at the end of every week. Please share, let other folks know about this podcast. It's unusually frank, unusually unvarnished, and we tackle controversial topics straight on. And, we don't always agree, but we try to dissect those topics. And today we're going to probably, I guess we could say, continue a topic from last week where, and again, let me preface the show by saying we are not, Inside Reality is not advocating for the overthrow of the government. We're not advocating for violence. We're not advocating for any of that. But before the show, I think Jimmy and I both agreed that we are portending, we are predicting, we are extrapolating that at some time relatively soon, I say within the next 5 to 10 years, I just don't see how the country can be sustained as one America with the whole dumb concept of shared values, which I've never agreed with anyway, portending that ultimately there will be possibly two different regions, one more conservative and the other more biased toward a liberal progressive way of looking at the world. And I'm fine with that. Again, we're not advocating for it. We're only philosophically discussing it and portending it because I think it's an inevitable reality that I just don't think we're reconcilable anymore. The two different sides the schism is so drastic that I just don't think there's the opportunity for a real practical, pragmatic synchronization so that we can just continue to live with each other. So again, we're not advocating for it. We're not advocating for the overthrow of government, nothing like that. We're simply philosophically looking into the future and making a prediction, a prognostication, an intellectual portending of the next 10 years. So with that, Jimmy, introduce your thoughts into the topic. That is, we will be a binary country, two separate ways of looking at the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thanks for being here, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey, for that introduction. You know, I have a slightly different perspective on it. I think that we are kind of we have reached a certain point of we talked about this, the era where we can't reconcile. I mean, kind of like in a marriage where two people just can't come to any reasonable reconciliation, and so as a result, divorce kind of has to take place. And so we are definitely right on the edge of that for a number of reasons. And some of this is not even, I don't think it's even, I mean, I think that there's more to it. I think that there are agitators and people like that are behind the scenes manipulating things. I mean, that is very clear. Now, we can argue over who's doing that and all that, and obviously people on the right are saying this group and people on the left are saying this group. And so what's really interesting is that this is not, it's also not a new thing. I mean, we saw this happening in, right before the Civil War. I mean, of course, at that time, the major issue was over slavery. I mean, that's one of the major issues that drove the party. If you were to look at that history, we can see this, a lot of the things that are happening. Which is really interesting too, is that you're seeing kind of a lot of the realignment of the politics as well. I mean, for instance, by the time that the Civil War took place, I mean, those that were on the side of slavery were completely on the Democratic side. I mean, that again, this is historical. I mean, notable historical fact. And I mean, certainly if you feel differently, leave it in the comment.
This isn't about feeling. These are facts. Quit apologizing.
No.
You're stating
I'm not
fact.
apologizing.
I'm so tired of living in this damn world where people's feelings supplant fact and metric. Okay. The fact is, Democrats were overwhelmingly the population that subscribed to, endorsed, and institutionalized slavery in the South.
That is the historical fact.
So it's not about feeling. It's just undeniable, incontrovertible fact.
Yeah,
so
and I'm just opening
this whole feeling, overwhelming fact and analysis. That's one
all
of the
I'm
reasons
saying,
why I think this country needs to divide. And those of us that subscribe to analytics, to a sense of pragmatic thinking, frontal cortex thinking instead of limbic thinking, maybe we should just have our own country. Again, we're not advocating for violence or the overthrow of the current government, but we should at least consider it philosophically, and then maybe consider writing a constitution around that and peacefully maybe just divorcing ourselves from the emotional population that always wants to move forward everything based on how they feel.
Yeah. Well, let me just, this is where you and I, Jeffrey, always have our differences. I was just simply pointing out that those that may not have the same agreement with it and say, okay, well, here's proof that is contrary to what you're saying, and that I'm just saying, we welcome that. And
so we're going to welcome someone who put forth a well thought out, studied, metric oriented, practical, analysis oriented thesis that basically contradicts and is the antithetical to the fact that during what was it 1861 to April of 1865, the predominant population in the South was made up of non-Democrats. Someone's going to do that?
No, not
You're
the population.
That
so
thesis?
Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, again, we have an open discussion here, right? I mean, we're saying that
this isn't a discussion. It's got to be based on fact.
Well, no, that's fine. I'm inviting whoever.
You're going to rewrite every single book that basically scrutinized or revealed strategies that took place during the Civil War, whether it was sociological, whether it was militaristic, whether it was economic, whether it was political. If that can be done, then we'll literally through this show rewrite history.
I'm just pointing out that, there are people with a lot of other opinions and they have their own arguments. And I'm fine with that. I'm just saying that if that's your position, then present those.
I just don't understand your logic.
Yeah. Anyway.
If you drop a hammer 5 feet from sea level, let's say at Santa Monica Harbor on the beach, that hammer is going to fall at a certain rate. I think it's 33 feet per second, something like
correct.
that.
9.8.
So I don't care how you feel about that. I don't care what your opinion is. It is a fact on planet Earth at this particular time. Because remember, Earth will probably move its orbit at some point. I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
The physics of Earth and gravity, and based on Newton and physics and other physics that surround that experiment, a hammer will drop at a certain rate at sea level on planet Earth. It has nothing to do with opinion or how you feel. Based on that thought, that construct, a person's feeling about World War or the Civil War, just because they have an opinion about it or a feeling about it, you can't change those facts.
Well,
the Democrats overwhelmingly supported the institution of slavery, and actually
yes, that is the historical
600,000
fact.
people died.
Correct.
I think 400 of that 600,000 were from the South, wanting to protect that institution called slavery, and they were mostly Democrats. That's irrefutable.
Well, by the time the Civil War ensued, my understanding is that every Democrat that didn't support it left the Democratic Party, leaving behind in the Democratic Party. Now, again, I'm not a historian. I don't know anything.
You're talking about in April of 1865, the Democrats had basically surrendered their political position because they knew the war was inevitable and the South was going to lose, so they moved to the
No. I'm saying that by the time the Civil War ensued, meaning that it began.
When it began. That was in Fort Sumner, South Carolina,
correct.
1861.
After the secession of South Carolina, of course, then the remaining states formed the Confederate. What I'm saying is that my understanding of it is that by this point in the history, thereabouts, the people that were on the Democratic side that maintained a position of slavery was only Democrats, no Republicans, nor were any Democrats that didn't have that position. They also left the party. So that's my understanding and my read of that history. That's all I'm saying. And again, I'm not a historian, neither are you. And I know we both studied a good part of history. The thing about history is that things can be manipulated, and it's not the same in some instances, like measuring, like you were saying with the hammer on the beach. There's recall, but there's also records and so forth, and so we can use those, like congressional records and stuff, to determine where these things are, and that's what I'm saying, that's what is bearing out.
Well, we're going off on a tangent. Let's come back to do you think the country is going to we're divided such that they'll end up being two regions, or will be a binary country based on what used to be the contiguous United States? There'll be two separate parts of that, like a binary part, maybe west of the Mississippi, maybe south of Mississippi, red on one side, blue on the other. Do you see something like that happening? I
see something like that forming even right now. We're seeing some of that happening. The question is,
forming even between you and me as people.
Correct. Well, yeah. Yes and no on that. What I'm saying is that these formation of these individual regions are much more complex than red and blue, liberal and conservative. So I don't think that the breakup is going to be just two countries from this. Or, back in the days when there's 13 colonies and all that, when that split happened, you can argue because of the number of people, it was easy enough to do. But we've got about 350 million people. And there's enough people that have their own perspective and position that they may very well just say, okay, this is our territory now. So I'm saying that could happen.
I was using oversimplification to make a basic, almost a prima facie point, okay?
Now, here's an example.
This has happened before. in world history numerous times. Are you
So
aware
here's
of my friend Caesar over here?
Yeah.
Caesar? You know what happened to Rome, right? After the empire became so big, what happened?
Yeah.
About 300 AD.
It's
300
broken up.
years after this guy.
Yeah.
I'm testing your history about Rome. If you don't know, I'll tell you.
All right,
You had
tell me.
You had a separation, Eastern Roman Empire.
Eastern Roman.
in what is
Western-
now Turkey, which is now
Mm-hmm.
Constantinople, Byzantium. The hell's it called now?
Istanbul.
Istanbul. There you go. That was the Eastern
That
Empire.
was dividing line.
And then
Yeah.
Rome constituted the Western Empire.
Western
I'll give you
Empire,
another example. After World War II, when May of 45, when Hitler shot himself, I think it was actually April, but when May 45 happened, when European war ended, right? You remember it still went on for a few more months because the
Yeah,
Japanese.
VE.
But
Yeah.
what happened? You had West and East Germany, right? I'll give you
Yep.
another example. You ever heard of Korea, North and South
North and
Korea?
South. Yeah.
You want another example, people? You heard of Vietnam, South Korea? So this whole idea of countries dividing based on either a political worldview, an economic worldview that's so irreconcilable
Religious
from the
worldview
other
when it
side,
came to
it's happened. It's happened, yeah, Yugoslavia, whatever. So Korea, Rome, Germany, Vietnam, Civil War here in the United States. It's happened so many times before. And it's happening right before our eyes. You have two populations on either extreme, the MAGA folk and the progressive liberal folk, that literally hate each other, unfortunately. I mean, I see that just, it's beyond, I disagree with you. It's like I
It's
said
vitriolic. I mean,
it's vitriol. It's
yeah.
poisonous. Again, we're not advocating for that. I'm not.
We're just
advocating for
identifying.
that.
Yeah, we're just identifying what we're seeing.
We're observing it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what this show's about. We observe things, we talk about it, we agree, we disagree, whatever the hell. But we put forth things that people just are unwilling to say out loud. That's what we're doing. That's what we do. Again, we respect the Constitution. I respect authority. You respect authority. I'm simply philosophically extrapolating into the future based on observations I see today, and I'm prognosticating, I'm portending a possible outcome. We hope it's nonviolent. We hope it's peaceful, but I just think that the irreconcilability between those two populations are so palpable that I just don't think living in the same country under the same set of governances just makes any sense, because people are not respecting authority.
Yeah. Well, they're not even respecting. I mean, like for instance, I mean, what's really interesting is that at least when it comes to the immigration and border stuff, Trump, regardless of what you think of him, he's the first president in probably 30, 40 years that have really done any definitive, management of the border.
Right.
Because even Reagan tried. I mean, and he ended up just giving amnesty to a whole bunch of people, because it was easier to deal with it than And so the laws that we have on the books, if you will, for immigration was not even being followed in any way. And now we're seeing even more evidence. There was a recent release. I don't know if you saw that. We'll include it in this. It was a release of I think it was 2 million or something that were brought in through in the last administration, Biden administration, and given Social Security and
administration.
What's that?
The auto pen administration.
Correct. And given, not only asylum, but also given Social Security numbers and everything. And this was actually reported by Doge. Doge is actually part of what they discovered in their whole thing. But the point is, there's more here than what we're seeing. And here's another thing that's really interesting. I asked you before we started the show if you saw that movie. There was a movie. I haven't seen it either. It's called Civil War. It was released, I think it was last year. What was interesting is somebody pointed out that was interesting, that was represented in the movie and presented in the movie, was the name of a coalition of states. And what was interesting is that this last week, I think it was, Gavin Newsom, on Stephen Colbert's show, presented this whole alliance that he's talking about. And he's calling it the Western Alliance, which is interesting because in that movie, that's what they call that same formation of these states. So
Newsom? What's he advocating?
This was they were doing this in order to protect. He's saying to protect people from being able to have access to because of the HHS, because of the medical restriction that would, and so forth. And so
What the hell you're talking about? What are you talking? I don't know.
Well-
I'm not
well,
trying to be
when-
disrespectful to you because I like you, I respect you, but I don't know what you're talking about.
like I said, I only took a glance at this, and so I don't know the specific details of it to be able to give you a full account. I can pull it up and
What's the
show
point,
it.
I guess is what I'm
Well, my point is that there's an interesting coincidence, is what I'm saying. Here is this movie laying out a civil war, okay, between the U.S. Within the U.S. between the different factions, okay,
Yep.
and then coincidentally, the same name is used by Gavin Newsom to name this whole alliance. So I'm just saying, look into it, and it again.
You weren't born in 1978 when the China Syndrome was released theatrically, Jane Fonda. The China
Yeah,
Syndrome
I heard about it.
was about this, I guess you'd say this power plant, nuclear power plant.
Sure.
And there was a structural deficiency within the structure of these large structures that kept the pods, they're overheated through, nuclear reactions, cooled,
Sure, yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
they were compromised, I guess. And there was a release of radiation, gamma rays, those little tiny rays that disrupt your cells. And guess what happened like a month later after the release of that movie? 9 Mile,
That-
whatever the hell it was in
3
Vermont
Mile,
or Connecticut or whatever, 3 Mile Island.
the 3 Island,
was.
yeah.
So you talk about a coincidence that happened after a movie was released. And populations, including me at the time, were extremely cynical and suspicious about how the hell did this movie get released literally a month 3 Mile Island happened. I believe this was 1979, correct me if I'm wrong. So
I don't remember the date exactly.
so
but yeah.
these kinds of movies or whatever and coincidences and parallels to what happens in the human condition, it's happened before.
Yeah.
Getting back to your
And
point, what is Gavin Newsom, that little slick guy from California who is one of the most insincere people in the world? He'll say anything based on the political winds, as you know, to aggrandize power. But what was he saying about a Western alliance? What's his thesis? What is he advocating for as a thesis?
So this is a health alliance. I mean,
Health alliance.
yeah, because what he's trying to put together in his argument is that because of what the CDC and what Trump just last few days did through HHS was, like for instance, when he revealed about Tylenol and the vaccines and how that was part of the contributing factors to the cause of autism, right? I mean, it's a pretty interesting kind of debate there going on, and so he recently issued this and saying that they have formed this Western alliance in order to basically keep the federal government, so to speak, in check when it comes to allowing people to have access to it. That's my reading of it.
What does
I would
that
need
have to do
drink-
with the country being so divided that
Well,
it may end up, we may end up being in a binary two-region situation in 10. What does that have
Well,
to do
again,
with that?
the reason why I bring that up is that it's just an interesting coincidence that he named this alliance the same as this in the movie. Like I said, I haven't seen the movie yet, so we need to see. I'm going to go and rent the movie so that I can see what, the context of it. It was just something that I read that kind of caught my attention, right, as it relates to Civil War and all that. Because we were talking about that last week, and then in the show we wanted to talk about Civil War. So what I'm getting at is that there's definitely somebody or some things that are staging some of the events and some of the actions and activities, steering us in that direction.
You're hinting at a conspiratorial kind of a
Yeah,
number of forces underneath this vitriol on both sides. You're hinting at that. I'm saying out loud, it's Facebook, it's the social media platforms, it's the phone that allow people to basically select their own worldview based on information coming from sources that only reflect the way they want to see the world.
Yeah, that is definitely. That's definitely within.
I don't know that you can call that a conspiracy or just obvious.
That part is not a conspiracy.
I mean, it's just obvious technology. It allows people to see the world based on the way they want to see it, and basically ignore other realities. And the other thing that's unique about what you said earlier, the country is made up of this country is now currently made up of about 300 million citizens and about another 20 million that Biden let in. So you got about almost 400 million people here. The difference between now and when it was incepted in 1776, 1787, when the Constitution was formalized and ratified, right around that time. With me so far?
Yeah.
The population was largely homogeneous.
Mhm.
Europe,
Ethnically, yeah.
Caucasian, white. You had slaves, and you had some indigenous people, which were.
But they weren't really participant. But they weren't not
participating in
significant number,
governance.
and they weren't
Yeah,
participating.
they were like, get the hell out of
Yeah.
here. Leave us.
Yeah.
Nobody ever talks about that. We're so diverse today. So contrast today, 250 years into the future from that point, you've got Asian, you've got Korean, you've got Vietnamese, you've got Chinese, you've got Japanese, you've got Hispanics, you've got Puerto Ricans, you got Cubans, you got blacks from Kenya, you got blacks from Morocco, you got blacks from Egypt, you got blacks from
Nigeria, Congo.
Australians, you've got French. So the point is, it's the salad bowl is such a mixture of so many ethnicities, of so many anthropologies, of so many different perspectives, that you have literally millions, almost, I guess you could say thousands, probably not millions, probably 10,000 ways of looking at what this country should look like, and not able to agree on this dumb concept of shared American values, which I just don't think exists. Because a population, as I said, 250 years ago, was much more anthropologically easier to manage, easier to arrive at consensus than it is today, because you literally have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of different ethnicities that I don't know how it's possible to agree on almost anything.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would agree with you on that assessment, and here's why. Europe is a clear example of that very thing, right? We just talked about, the splitting of the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. But besides that, we had, look at, between just France and England, or between the Germans and the French. They've been at
England and Wales.
Yeah, exactly. So just because they're ethnically similar and anthropologically similar, they don't have an agreement in any way significant either. So as far as war and at odds with each other, that's why they have those boundaries there. Mm-hmm. I think that to me is not the best argument.
They do need to have the United Kingdom made up of Scotland and Ireland and England and Wales and whatever the hell. So there is that agreement. But
that's mostly for economic, just like the European Union was really formed for economic reasons, not necessarily for political reasons. Now, it has the political reach have now gone further. This is one of the big fight right now between the Europeans, specifically the different places in Europe right now over the European Union. Why do you think you had Brexit? Brexit was an example of an idea where the economic benefits versus the political reach.
There's still an anthropological similarity between that part of the world, and also the location of that part of the world made it possible for them to agree that maybe if we formed a coalition, some of the resources that we have and others have could benefit our region, our location on planet Earth.
Well, the European Union was formed directly to compete with the U.S. because the U.S. has kind of this. The U.S. is very unique, like I said, because we have a political, alliance along with the economic. So there's both that. So that's why the European Union is fraught with problems because politically there was no alignment other than, like I said, partly a great overreach of the Parliament of the EU. Okay, this is where, like I said, a lot of the pushback and the fight happens. Look at the United Nations. Okay, and the formation. And
I don't want to look at the United Nations. It's a pointless,
I'm just
feckless.
Yeah.
Body doesn't do anything.
But the United Nations is, I guess, you could say, either emblematic of what we're experiencing, because that's what they're basically what the U.S. has kind of shifted into, more of a United Nation, and that's what the push has been from one side. Whereas if you look at Europe, look at U.S. When you have time for assimilation and this is why I disagree with you earlier when you were saying that we don't have American values. No. To me, there are some values that we share as principle, not necessarily universally across it.
Name three that someone from Vermont
Well-
shares with somebody from Montana?
Principally, the freedom of
I'm talking about pragmatically.
life, liberty, and property, for instance. Okay,
But it is
private ownership
it's
of property.
It expresses itself very differently.
It doesn't
Somebody-
matter.
somebody
Principally,
living in
not
Montpelier
necessarily.
has
Yes,
a different way of expressing life, liberty, or whatever the hell than somebody that's on a ranch.
understood, but that's not that's the details that is why it's distinctively different between the different states. That's why the identity of the state remain, because the identity of the states remain in order to preserve that localized identity and localized values. But principally, again, this is important, where you have precepts and principles, is that we have this idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And so because that's the principle, the Constitution was formed in order to safeguard, and that's why even when the first version of the Constitution, or you can even say the pre-Constitution, the Article of Confederation, and then later the first draft of the Constitution, and then it wasn't until the Bill of Rights before it was fully adopted by all the
And that was like 10
colony,
years
the states.
after. That was like 10 years
Correct.
after
the
1787.
correct,
But
1887.
these principles are assumed. I'll give you a quick example. If you believe, surveys, and I'm not sure I do, I'm very cynical, but according
Sure.
to surveys, something like 30 to 40% of America's population under the age of 25, I think it's 18 to 25, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
look it up, subscribes to the notion that capitalism is not a good form of economic apparatus in this significant
60%.
population that's going to supplant us,
Yeah.
okay, that does not subscribe to capitalism as an apparatus
Okay.
of economic machine that we operate
Okay, but
under.
why do you think?
So
but what is
how do you
though?
tell me that population is going to assume power in the next 20 years is going to share a value called freedom to express yourself and pursue happiness economically? Because their pursuit of economics is going to be radically different than what even the forefathers, what the hell they were, the framers, who had a loose interpretation of capitalism.
Yeah.
It's kind of a loose interpretation of capitalism.
Yes.
Your argument for shared values.
Well, no, it's not, because
Yes, it is.
no. Well, no. Here's why. Because the very shared value is saying that if that's the direction that the majority of the country wants to go, then you have every right to pursue that, provided that you don't violate, the Constitution. Now, obviously, in order to violate the Constitution means that you can certainly change the Constitution. It's called the amendment process. You got to get 2/3 majority or 3/4 majority or something
I don't
like
think
that.
you're listening to me. That same population and more people that we think don't even subscribe to the Constitution as a I guess you say as a guideline, as a framework, and
Yeah.
with the authority to basically govern this country. I don't think are you listening to people that are younger than yourself? They don't even subscribe to, I don't even like saying they, but I'm going to use they. Not only do they not subscribe to capitalism, that and more population embraces socialism loosely, and further does not recognize the authority, nor do they want to recognize the authority or the architecture of what is now the U.S. Constitution. We're not advocating that we overthrow the Constitution. I'm not, you're not, this show is not.
Yeah.
But to say that there aren't millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people living in this country that don't accept capitalism as the apparatus for an economic machine that we live under, and don't want to accept the United States competition, is both naive and irresponsible.
Yeah. No,
Are you naive and irresponsible?
I hear what you're
Are
saying.
you naive and irresponsible, Jimmy?
No, I'm
Okay.
not.
Do you accept what I just said, that millions and millions and millions of people, of
I-
fellow Americans, the Constitution, nor do they
I
want
hear-
to believe in it, nor do they want to believe in capitalism?
I
Are you
hear
with-
what
do
you're
you understand
saying.
that?
I hear.
They're saying it.
Okay, hold on. Let me. I hear what you're saying in terms of what you're reporting, what you've observed from the polls and all that. Okay, it is startling to hear that and to see that. Okay, no question. not here to challenge that. I mean, a perfect example is what's happening in Minnesota and what's happening specifically in New York. Okay, there's two very, very prominent, very, very high access individual. Okay, we're talking about New York City, right? Mandami, yeah,
Dami, whatever the hell.
yeah, and so and the majority of the people that is in his camp are young people, okay? And this is why, in my opinion,
He's an unapologetic, overt,
correct.
here
Yes.
I am. That's him
Yes.
speaking, not me.
Yes, yes, and not only that, but he also pushes to make sure that get other socialists, elected and all that kind of stuff too. That's his push. But this is why I think where Charlie Kirk was so dangerous to them, because that's the other side of, because Charlie Kirk, didn't agree with that, and of course he was massively influential within the younger population. I mean, it's well acknowledged that if it wasn't for Charlie Kirk and what he did, Trump would not have won the 2024 election.
I don't know if I agree with that.
That is well, it's because there was he actually helped.
Well, he galvanized a lot of the young population.
That voted for Trump. So I mean, for the first time, I mean, you have to understand this. For the first time in modern political history, that you have a group that was significant, in terms of the young. I mean, like young people and minority were on this one side. I mean, this is why the whole thing is just freaking out the Democratic machine, because the numbers are trending in that direction. I mean, like for instance, black men, for the first time in I don't know how long,
Hispanic Catholics, too.
Hispanic and so forth, because they saw or they were seeing what was going on in the Democratic Party, so
policies, indefensible policies, defund the police,
because
open border, women
and because
playing
of all
in
that,
sports,
yeah,
indefensible positions.
Yes, and as a result of that, they didn't necessarily. I mean, they held their nose while they were voting for Trump, but they did it, anyway. And so that's what we're seeing, and certainly that's what's happening. I think
so. What
that
you're saying is a known socialist, palpably known, overt socialist, unapologetic, Abnami, whatever that guy's name is, he's going to be the next mayor of the country's largest city, and also the apex, the apotheosis, the Mecca, no pun intended, of the economic capital of the world, New York City. The financial Mecca of the world is New York City, the most populous city in the country, New York City. And the next mayor is a known, unapologetic, overt, palpable socialist.
Correct.
That's the direction of this country.
Yeah, that is the steering rod.
That's irreconcilable with a capitalist Texan who has a ranch outside of Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah, that
Those
is.
two cannot literally live with each other. Can't happen.
Well, they can't if they. So I think that we can if people choose to find ways to come to certain. This is one of the reasons why this show was conceived was to help with these conversations, to bring these things.
How does you want to choose to live with? How can you actually even economically reconcile the two? A rancher outside of Lubbock, Texas, and a known socialist who lives in an apartment in New York City, who doesn't want to produce, who does not want to produce, who does not celebrate a work ethic. But
Well, they're going to have to do something at some point.
No, they don't. Under certain people
the
don't
government
do anything can receive aid from the government.
Yeah, no, I mean, until you run out of resource, and then you're going to go and you can pillage your
that's the part
neighbor.
the socialists don't talk about.
Yeah, that.
And once you run out of resources because people are not producing, that machine dies, buddy. But we're not talking about the end. We're just talking about making the machine operate, the socialistic machine, which we're trending toward.
Yeah, we are.
Getting back to answering my question, the rancher
we have AOC
and all his
who's
workers
a socialist
living outside of Lubbock, Texas, raises cattle and tills the land and raises some corn or whatever the hell.
I mean, he's fine. Hands. I mean, he's fine. But no, as long as he's able to raise his.
You just said they're going to live together. The social model and the capitalistic model, they can't work together, because when he's producing meat and corn, and he worked to raise the cows, and here's 1,000 ribeye steaks and 1,000 pounds of brisket that I worked for. I want to sell it to you, Mr. New York Mayor. And the mayor says, no, I don't subscribe to a capitalistic system. Underneath our government, those cows are subject to state regulation. So I can give you a small pittance, but I'm not going to give you what supply and demand says that meat is worth.
Sure.
Is that
Can happen.
reconcilable? So what? Here's my question then. You're still not answering the question. The guy that owns the ranch, is he going to continue to work his ass off to have another
No.
manifestation of meat when he was paid a pittance for it because those cows are now under the jurisdiction of state governance, and instead of earning, let's say, $30 a pound for ribeye, and he's got 1,000 pounds of that, the socialist government says, we're going to give you $5 a pound, not 30. And you're going to be satisfied with that. What does that do with his incentive?
Well, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but
You
I don't
didn't answer it.
understand.
What does it do with his incentive?
There's no incentive.
Exactly. So now
I
you
mean,
don't have meat
so-
next year because the guy's going to
Yeah.
I'm not
Well,
going to do this
then-
anymore.
yeah.
It's this. Those
Well, there's no meat because
systems are irreconcilable.
yeah, that part I
Should we
agree that
conclude the
there's
show now because it's just done. It's over. Enjoy America while we have it.
yeah. Well, this is where
Enjoy.
again, once those store shelves are empty. I mean, we saw what happened when COVID, right? I mean, even fighting over
But what
toilet
happens?
paper.
All the socialists go to the grocery store and they're all empty. What happens then?
Yeah, that's when riots. I mean, that's again, this is history here.
And then what
We've
happens
seen it
after
plenty
the
of
riots?
times. Well, they're going to lynch whoever that they feel is going to be responsible, and you can be certain that the leadership that got them there ain't going to be the one that get lynched, you know, because they have all the mechanism in their world to avert that, and you know, and to say, oh, keep believing because we know it's gonna, you know, and that's part of the sell.
Ultimately, Marx talked about capitalism failing for lots of reasons, because people end up not wanting to continue to work over hundreds of years and all that, and exploitation of workers, all these things. So neither of these models can extrapolate into hundreds of years of success. I'm not saying that. But at least capitalism does reward work ethic and production.
Well, yes. Now, you got to keep in mind one other thing, too, is that one of the reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed was that we basically outproduced them. Okay? I mean, the communism, but China, for instance, as an example, contrasts, the Chinese took a different route. They allow a capital, I mean, that's why they have a capitalist system in place. It just happens to be state, you know, run capitalism. So their
State
capitalism
control.
is state control, so there's no private ownership, and certainly that's kind of the model that Mamdani is, for instance, is advocating. That's why he's like, no, look, we're going to have grocery stores that are owned by the city, and so that way you can have low price on food and so forth, you know, because and there's some benefits to that on some level, because now you end up with, I mean, you've got a bigger buying power, so even when you buy from a capitalistic area source, you do have a larger buying power, because now you're buying for 14 million people or 4 million people, you know. So
Yeah,
you,
but the
you do have
quality
that.
of that product, there's no incentivization to maximize quality of product. When people's standards are so low, they'll just accept, you know, shitty
Yeah.
bread. as
Well, yeah,
opposed
and that's
to
usually how
really good
how
bread
that
or whatever
happens.
that- This is
But for
where
some
this whole
people,
thing
that's all
doesn't
they.
work out. Over time, it's all about economics, and people don't understand this. We should do a show on it. Economics,
Yeah.
if it's not about anything, it's about supply and demand, and it's also about incentivization.
Yeah, I
People
mean,
that- people that do something do it because they're incentivized and rewarded for doing whatever the hell they do. And excellence is generally rewarded more than, my Rolex watch is worth more than your Timex for lots of reasons. Okay,
Correct.
because there's excellence here, and I
Yeah.
paid a lot of money for it, relatively speaking, because I wanted excellence, because I like the aesthetics, and I have some level of vanity, which I admit. But
Yeah.
Rolex is not going to continue to put a watch out. By the way, it takes 6 to 8 months to make one watch. They're not going to
Yeah.
they're not going to put out a watch like this, you know, at $10,000 a watch. If government takes over and says, oh, you know what, that same watch you're going to sell for $1,000, so everybody can have one. Do you think the quality and excellence will go into the next versions of those watches? if they're paid $1,000 versus 10,000 for the same watch?
Of course not. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
So
I
you're
mean, there's
degrading-
always that trade-off.
You're
There's
degrading excellence.
Yeah. Well, there's quality, time, and money, right? I mean, if you bring the cost down, that means that you have to spend more time on it, right? I mean, this is the classic, challenge in any business. For instance, I mean, McDonald's, you don't expect a high-quality burger. You go there because they're fast and they're relatively inexpensive, but quality is not their first thing. You go to Five Guys, it takes longer because time is not the priority. The quality is the priority, and then of course, in some cases, you go to a place where it charges you $20 for a burger because, again, the quality is what they're charging you for.
Anyway, we went off on a tangent again. Maybe
But
I
that's
did
the
as well.
dynamic.
I hate going
That's the
off on these
dynamic.
damn tangents. How does this conclude? Okay, we've got about 1 minute.
Okay.
Are we going to end up being separate, binary regions? I think we are.
Well,
Maybe there's 3 regions. I just don't think the country is under this whole nonsense. One America, shared values. Again, we're not advocating for any overthrow of government. We're observing, and I'm portending, extrapolating. There's just too many ways. The two sides are so irreconcilably crystallized in their positions that they literally hate each other. And I just don't think there's a reconciliation that's sustainable. I just think there's going to be either separate states with really separate, almost constitutions maybe. I know states have their own constitutions, but I think they'll gravitate toward each other and tether themselves to each other as like regions that are a little bit more about capitalism, and then other regions that are more maybe about socialism. We're not advocating for that.
I mean, that's just where the trend. I mean, if we look at
where the trend
the
is.
trend line is moving definitely in that direction.
30 seconds.
However, like I said, there's a counter trend that's happening also. Again, this is going back to what Charlie Kirk was doing, and I think that
The counter trend is not reconcilable with the other side.
It doesn't
just
matter. It
isn't.
doesn't have to.
It does
Well-
matter because that population has to do something within the framework of where they live, or they can't be part of the economic system. Because the MAGA people are not going to, over time, continue to give free stuff to people that don't produce. This is inside reality. We're done. I'm done. See you later. Good always talking to you, Jimmy. You're a good guy. I just don't agree with about 43% of what you talk about. Anyway,
43 only.
40 inside reality, violent, respect the Constitution. We're just portending possible fragmentation of
Well, I
what
think
was
that
once the United States of America.
I think that if we can come to some deeper agreement, I think that's
Not
where
going to
we.
happen.